So hi everyone, thank you for coming to the to grad school or not to grad session. Hopefully you know me by now, but if you just joined us, my name is Elin Chan. I'm one of the career counselors at the Academic Advising and Career Center. Along with me are also Jen, manager. She's here to help me monitor the chat and of course also answer any question you may have about grad school. And we also have Wendy working really hard in the background, making sure everything is running perfectly. So a word of warning, I just did see that dreaded your internet connections unstable message across my Zoom screen. So if for any reason I freeze or I drop out or get kicked out of Zoom, I'm sure Jen and Wendy will take good care of you while I try to reconnect. All right, so let's get moving in the session. So just a reminder, we do have our live captionist with us. So she will be live captioning. So if you want to see the subtitle, please click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and show subtitle. Also noting that this session will be recorded. Okay, so just a few housekeeping notes. All right, so moving right into our discussion, like Jen and I already mentioned, we want this hour to be more of a discussion. Of course, I hope to provide you with a brief overview of graduate school. And I have laid out some really common questions that I usually get in one-on-one appointments or in our further education workshop. So we will go through those, and hopefully along the way, I will also provide you with some resources that are going to be helpful in helping you make the decision. But of course, it's all about answering your questions today. So as a quick overview, I would loosely define graduate school as any further education beyond your bachelor or your undergraduate degree. So just to showcase a few examples, Master of Arts in Anthropology, Master of Public Health, Master of Business Administration, Master of Science in Genetic Counseling. These are all different types of graduate school that you can consider. But not all programs are created the same, right? So usually to help students understand their options, I would put them into three broad categories, okay? So one is what I typically consider to be research-focused programs, and they usually, a clue would be they're usually Master of Arts or Master of Science. And then of course it's Master of Arts in a discipline or Master of Science in biology or Master of Science in biochemistry, for example. So usually these programs, like I mentioned, are very research oriented, and it also usually includes completing a thesis as part of your program completion. Another type would be what we typically consider to be professional program, okay? And one major difference is instead of being very research focused, professional programs are typically more course-based and usually will include an internship or a practicum as part of the program. And it's a professional it's usually considered a professional program. Professional designation. So a professional program, again, it's not limited to just the two I have on the screen, but those are two examples I wanted to share with you. So for example, a Master of Health Science or a Master of Science in Planning, okay? So for example, the Master of Science in Planning would lead directly into the planner professional designation. The third type, again.
Just for the audio, you broke up a little bit where you were saying that professional programs are usually course-based and often have an internship. So I just want that for the audio for the video.
Mm-hmm. And we also do have a question in the chat. Where does MBA fall under? Again, I typically consider MBA to be a professional program. I don't know if Jen would agree or Wendy would agree, but I would say MBA probably falls under the professional program. Okay, but there is now a lot of programs that are trying to do kind of be the best in both worlds. So there's now also a lot of what we consider to be hybrid programs, right? So they are course-based, but they also involve research courses and because we are really, moving towards the trend of making sure all the students have experience, moving towards experiential education. So there are now also a lot of masters that may involve research, but may also still include an internship or a practicum. Okay, so these may involve a research paper, or some of them may have a comprehensive exam. So again, examples of that could be a master's in public policy, master's of education are some quick examples of these. Okay. All right, so some of the questions I get quite often in my one-on-one appointments is student asking, do I need graduate school? How do I know graduate school is right for me? What do I need to get into graduate school? And of course, sometimes I also get questions about, am I gonna make more money if I get a master's? Other than masters, what else is out there? So I hope to address some of these questions throughout the rest of my slides and our discussion. But like I said, please also, put in the chat your questions or unmute the mic and ask your questions. And I really hope that we will have a fruitful discussion throughout this hour. So one of the first questions, do I need graduate school? Unfortunately, it really depends. There is no clear-cut answer, but generally the first question I will throw back at you is, what is your career goal, right? Because whether or not you need graduate school really also depends on your career goal. Does it require that? So for some professions, right? So for those of you who may be really keen, becoming a physiotherapist or, becoming a speech language pathologist or becoming a teacher, a lot of times as part of your occupational requirement, master degree is part of that requirement, okay? So in some cases, the answer is yes, and in some cases, it's not really, but you may still need to do more research. So I will also encourage you to think about, is graduate school worth the investment, okay? So again, that may mean researching how much tuition cost, right? Some programs are relatively a lot more expensive than your undergraduate programs. But some programs also have funding options, right? So you may be actually compensated to do research as part of your master program. So it's also good to look at those options. And of course, you want to also research into prospective career outcomes and earnings. So one way to do that certainly is to use some salary websites like salary.com. You can also use government salary wages on the job bank website. Okay, so if you're not familiar with those, we can certainly pop them in the chat, or I'm happy to show you at the end if anybody wants to take a look at all that. And I think another really great tool that provides with a real life market information. Instead of typing the person you're looking for, you may want to type in the degree that you're planning to get. So you might want to put in Master of Public Health, right? And then what LinkedIn
sorry, Elin, your audio cut out.
may look for people.
I just want to point out that you're talking about LinkedIn. You're talking about how to use LinkedIn. That part got cut off.
Okay, sorry. So again, using LinkedIn to use the search bar. So instead of maybe putting in the name of a person, what you can try to do is to put in maybe Masters of Public Health. So what LinkedIn will then do is search through people's profiles and find people who have completed the same degree, maybe at a different university, but you can then look at, where do they usually end up working? What kind of jobs do they usually land? And a lot of the program websites are also now doing a better job in showing you what kind of careers that graduates of the program typically have, right? So don't forget to also look at the program websites. And I would say I am also seeing more and more programs doing a better job in connecting you, a prospective student who's interested in the program, to maybe connecting you to someone who is currently in the program so you can learn more about the program, and potentially even connecting you to alumni of the program so you can learn more about career outcome. So don't hesitate to reach out if some of this information will help you make your decision. So the bottom line is really reach out, talk to other people, and learn from their experiences. So this is a quote that I quite like myself, so I always share it. So this is a blogger who completed a master's in political management. So she is in the States. So she wrote a blog about, considering further education. And she talked about, I'm not anti-master's degree, but I am anti getting a master's degree that you don't need. And I'm anti getting a master's degree because you feel pressured. It's like buying a pair of senseless shoes that you will never wear, except you will be paying for those shoes until you are 50. Okay. So I relate to this quote because I am often caught buying senseless shoes that I will never wear. So I thought it was an interesting way to also consider education that way. Okay, so her advice is that, again, she's not saying don't go to grad school, but she's suggesting that if you're considering going to grad school, take a minute, take a breath, think about things, right? And she suggests maybe exploring the real world for a year or two, do some research into what field you would like a career in, and see if you even need a master's degree. Then decide if you're ready to take the leap. Okay, and I personally think that's good advice. Okay, so all right, so of course that goes into really thinking about, is graduate school right for you? So for those of you who are considering the more research-oriented or focused program, one of the questions I will typically ask you is, are you prepared? Are you ready? Are you eager to dedicate about 2 years, because that's usually how long a research master's takes, into investigating a specific topic at a deeper level? Okay, so for some of you, you may have started a research project in your undergrad, but you feel like undergrad didn't give you enough opportunity, or you didn't have enough time to do a deep dive into that topic. If that's how you feel about that topic, then I would say a research master is probably a very good fit for you. Okay, for some of you, it may be that you're really trying to gain knowledge and experience in a particular area. Again, a master's degree might be a good answer, or maybe a good pathway for you to gain specific knowledge and experience in the area. And the other thing to consider is also, does it fit with your career and life goals, right? So it's also really important to have an end goal in mind. I think one of the things that a lot of students do is that they choose to go to grad school because they don't know what else to do. I think one of the things I see a lot of students do is that they choose graduate school because they don't know what else to do. Okay, and I would say that may not be the best reason for choosing to go to graduate school. Yet I do see it as, for a lot of students, it seems to be the easy thing to do. Okay, so really think about whether or not graduate school is going to fit with your long-term goal, and really think about your own motivations. Again, it may be quite common that you're getting pressure from family, from friends. I often also hear about peer pressure. All my friends are doing a master, so I'm gonna go do one too, right? Even though you may not be interested in the area, or you may not want to spend 2 years studying a topic, okay? But so really think about your own motivations. So at this point, I would like to just cover some very common admission requirements. Keep in mind, if you're thinking about graduate school, it is very important that you research individual programs at individual schools, because again, every school, every program could have different admission requirements. For example, a Master of Public Health at U of T, the requirement could be different from a Master of Public Health at another university, okay? So I wanna cover some general admission requirement, but I do also wanna emphasize how important it is to look at individual programs. Generally speaking, most graduate programs are looking at a mid-B average in your last year or last 2 years, okay? So one of the biggest concern I often hear from students is, oh, my GPA is not very good because I really didn't know what I was doing in my first and second year. The good news is graduate school typically are not paying that much attention to your first and second year. Okay, so they're usually paying more attention to your third year and fourth year. Also, depending on when you are applying. So let's say if you are putting together your application in your fourth year, they might be looking at your second and your third year if they're looking at the last 2 years. But if you're applying after you have graduated, then they might be looking at your third and your fourth year, okay? Another very typical component would be most graduate school want to have references. And depending again on the program you are applying to, they may only ask for academic references, which would be your professors, okay? So a common question I get is, can I use my TAs? Can I use my lab supervisor? Generally speaking, I would say that's not a great idea. You don't want your academic reference to come from your TA. However, you may want to connect with your TA, so your TA can potentially, kind of advocate for you in front of the professor, or potentially provide, some content for the academic reference. Okay, so you can still get support from the TA, but ultimately the reference should come from the professor. For a lot of professional or hybrid programs, they may also want what they call professional references. So in many cases, this could be a supervisor from the place where you work or the place you volunteer. And in many programs, they want both academic and professional. So it's quite common for a lot of programs to ask for 3 references. So sometimes it may be 1 academic, 1 professional, and the third one, often the school might give you the flexibility. So it can be either an academic or a professional, okay? And then another really common component is the personal statement, or the statement of intent, or the personal essay. They may call it something really express in the program. Why are you a good fit for the program?
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Elin. Do you think maybe turning off your camera might help?
Yep.
And closing any applications you have? I think I heard a little ping. If you can close your Outlook as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're trying. Oh, technology. So
sorry, guys.
That's okay. You cut off what you were saying. It's called a personal statement, but it's got other names.
Yeah. So sometimes it may be called a personal essay or a statement of intent, but this is really where you express why are you interested in a program, why you would be a good fit or a good candidate for the program, right? So it also is a place for you to communicate a lot of things that the admission committee may not otherwise know about you. Okay, so this is also sometimes a place where people will be able to explain any kind of academic anomaly on their transcript, or they may have special circumstances that challenges they have faced that they want the admission committee to know about. So that's a great place for you to talk about those things. The other fairly typical component would be a resume or a CV. So for a lot of professional and hybrid programs, they are more likely to ask for a resume versus sometimes research-oriented program like to use the terminology CV, curriculum vitae, more often. But ultimately, I would say from the student's point of view, the document is not that different. Again, if you're applying to a research program, naturally your resume or your CV would be more research focused. So you will want to highlight, your research experience, projects you have been involved in, versus a resume sometimes may be more experiential focus on your previous work experience, volunteer experience, extracurricular experience that might be relevant to the program you are applying to.
So Elin, there's a great question in the chat here. And I just want to throw it in here. So we've got this list of requirements and someone's asking, can we find general lists of requirements somewhere for types of graduate school programs, or are we kind of best to look up grad school programs one by one?
So I would say a general list will be kind of what you're kind of seeing on the screen. And then after that, I do think it would be best practice to look up graduate school one by one, because they're all sometimes a little bit different in different ways. So again, for some schools, they may want 500-word personal statement, but for another school, it may be they only want 250 words. For another school, they may allow 1,000 words. So I would say, at this point, if you're exploring hopefully these general admission requirements will help you understand the process. But if you are getting close to the stage where you're thinking about preparing your application, I do think at that point you want to research school by school, program by program to understand all the components. So even like little details like how many references do they want? Do they have to be academic versus professional? Again, you might be applying to an MBA program, but one school could ask for 3 references, one school could ask for 2, one school may not ask for any, right? So I do think it's important to research it program by program. Yeah. Jen, I don't know if you have anything else to add or.
Not from the chat, and I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm throwing some ideas in the chat to look for the licensing body if you know that you're aiming at a profession that's going to need a license.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be a good idea, because on their website somewhere they'll have a list of programs, which will make your job a little bit easier. They'll have, like recognized educational programs that they prefer, which doesn't mean they're the only ones that will qualify, but they certainly make your decision making easier. And the other website that I often recommend for Canadian grad schools is universitystudy.ca. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Universitystudy.ca is where you can find. And here's where it gets, not every grad school, it's got the publicly funded grad schools. So for example, out in BC, there's an amazing school that has a lot of business type programs called Royal Roads. I have had so many people say that the programs at Royal Roads University are amazing, but it's a private university, so it doesn't show up on universitystudy.ca. And so that's where, going back to what our TD rep said before, I know that was in the context of job search, but even for grad school, I highly recommend doing a little networking and just like learning doing some learning from what you can through, again, coffee chats, when we're in person, coffee chats, just to find out, like, what are some things that I might not know? What are some things that might not be obvious from like typical resources?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's a good question. Is a mid-B average considered competitive?
Excellent question. Unfortunately, my answer is once again going to be somewhat vague because it depends on the program. And I will also say it also depends on other components of your application, right? So I think a lot of schools uses the GPA, right, as kind of like a hurdle, right? But once you have the mid-B average, it's kind of also dependent on how strong your references are, how great your personal statement is, how much relevant experience you have with you, right? So it's not then just about your GPA. Yeah, and I think Jen is definitely right. Clinical psychology is probably, off the top of my head, I would say probably most competitive in terms of GPA. Yeah, and then we also have a question to go along with that. What if you apply for a grad school with lower GPA, lower potential? Does this be?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, so are some schools tougher than U of T? No, U of T is usually the worst case scenario. So if you've met the admission requirements at U of T, there's a good chance you'll probably be able to get in anywhere else as well. Other schools definitely have lower expectations. So for example, at U of T, I actually think it's a rule in the School of Graduate Studies that it's a B+. I know we have B on the slide, but I see a lot of programs now, I don't know if this is new, asking for a B+ in the last year or last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, U of T is usually, again, your worst case scenario. Sorry, Destiny, go ahead.
Someone have their hand up?
Yeah, Destiny,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of in the vein of talking about U of T,
Mm-hmm.
so the program that I've got into at U of T is fully funded, but then the program that I had been considering my top choice for a long time at McMaster is not fully funded, and it's kind of a different, they're two different programs, two different masters. One is Masters of Arts, one is Masters of Science. So my professor was telling me that obviously the prestige of U of T goes a long way, and the fact that it's fully funded. So I guess it's just like, would I have to be kind of critical of the fact that I guess it would be where my career goals lie, right? In when making the decision to pick the program.
Yeah, and I would say maybe go back to Jen's and Sean's tip from this morning, network, right? Maybe network with, in this case, if you have a role model or someone you would like to work for, like sometimes I said, maybe network with your future boss and try to figure out if, there is a preference. Certain industries, I think what you cannot compete with is University of Toronto's alumni network, just considering how long the university has been here and how many people graduate from the university, right? So sometimes the reputation is also that, I graduated from University of Toronto, so I, believe I have a good education. So I also trust other people that graduate from University of Toronto. So the reputation of university may work towards your advantage that way. However, I'm not sure what master program you got accepted into that you're considering, but I would say McMaster has a great reputation in health sciences.
Yeah.
Right. And also in the future, if you're hoping to work in that Hamilton, in that area, McMaster in some way may be, even more reputable compared to U of T, right? So I think those are some other factors that you may also want to take into consideration. But my best tip there, again, would probably be networking with people in the profession, in the area that you're trying to get into and get their take on it. Whether or not, is there one program that they really prefer students coming from? Is there a preference in terms of what school you graduate from? Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, and that's where doing your research on LinkedIn can be helpful too. Check out grads from both programs and see if they're see if you like the pattern that you see. You're like, oh, those Mac grads are working in places that I think are way more interesting, you know, and it might be worth foregoing the money and, you know, pursuing that. Or maybe you're not impressed, you know, maybe you don't see a difference really where those Mac grads are ending up, and then maybe the money looks a whole lot better, you know. It's,
And I see some of the comments in the chat is also about, you know, the fact that you did your undergrad at U of T. Do other graduate school kind of give you more credit for completing a difficult or completing your undergrad at a difficult university or difficult rigorous program? Again, I cannot really comment on that because I don't have any research or fact to base it on. I can only say that in terms of the admission representative I have spoken with, they usually say they don't give preference to particular universities or particular programs. So they do treat everyone the same. Right. But again, I think some school, when you look at the admission requirement, they do say, and I think, again, maybe with the changing trends, a lot of graduate school are also becoming more specific in their admission requirements. So recently I was reviewing a program with a student, and it actually said that they're looking at your last 2 years, but they expect, you know, in your third year, that 3 out of your 5 credits should be at the third year level. And then in your fourth year, they also expect 3 out of your 5 credits to be at the third or fourth year level, right? So schools are also becoming a little bit more specific in terms of what they're asking for. So if another student applying took A and B level courses in their last year and has an A plus versus you took difficult D level courses, I think they are now taking that into account. But again, I haven't heard any representatives say, you know, I treat York student this way, I treat U of T student this way, or I treat Ryerson students this way. So I can't really comment on that.
Yeah, and I think unofficially, probably admissions committees were always noticing, you know, if a candidate loaded up their last year with A-level courses. If we have any, by the way, if we have any UTM or St. George students, when we say A-level, we mean a 100 level. At UTSC, we say A, B, C, D, and it corresponds to 100, 200, 300, 400. But yeah, I think they're just making it official that they probably always had a preference for students who took like mostly year appropriate courses, because you could totally, it's basically cheating, right? You're padding your GPA if you fill up your last year with A-level courses, right? And so they've, I'm sure unofficially, they've always been like, okay, that's, come on, like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
But now it's official, right? Now they're putting it on their website and saying like, okay, people, like let's be serious, right? Acknowledging that you may have some first or second year courses in your last year to fulfill breadth requirements and stuff like that's funny, right? That's going to happen. But there's that too. And Maliha, thank you for that point. Some schools actually have a GPA conversion as well, while we're on the topic of GPA, so that your U of T grades can be converted over. Simple example, York University uses a GPA scale of 4.3. Like, what's a 4.3? So yeah, so sometimes you actually have to like do some math to figure out where you sit in relation to that school. Yeah. And Ela, maybe you can talk about 4 or 5 credits, because you were just talking about seeing this website that
Yeah, so again, I think if the program prefers that their students take full course load, 5 courses per semester, again, generally when you're reviewing the admission requirement, they will probably lay that out clearly. I would say generally speaking, I don't think 4 versus 5 is going to have a huge impact on your application, as long as, again, you demonstrate a strong GPA and that you have the ability level program. Yeah.
Sorry, Elaine, we just missed the last part there.
The people missed. So I would say generally speaking, 4 versus 5 shouldn't have a huge impact on your application unless it was specifically laid out by the program that they want you to complete full course load. Yeah, and
mostly it's med school. That's what I just threw in the chat. It's mostly med school that really
totally true.
Preference for a 5 course load. A lot of the time, some schools will be specific. They want a full-time course load, which could mean 3, 4, or 5. You can always double check with the program, right? Like, what do you mean if you're making some course decisions toward the end of your degree? But it's not a big deal. Now, with regard to credit, no credit. I think that's what someone's asking about here. Elin, any thoughts on credit, no credit in your last year?
I think, again, we're all on the same boat. We're all in a pandemic. It's not like only U of T students are impacted or only you are impacted. So I do think graduate school are also taking into account. So again, if it's something you want to make a statement about in your personal statement to explain, in the winter semester of 2020, this happened, right? So I made the decision to right? And then I think, again, if everything else in your application looks good, is what they're asking for, I really don't think that one credit or no credit is going to impact the overall competitiveness of your application.
And I've actually seen some, pardon me for jumping in, I've seen some like forgiving language even on websites, which I've never seen before in the last, 12 or 14 months, where grad school admission committees are officially putting on their admissions websites, like, we get it, pandemic, you're stressed, there's chaos, like, we'll take, if you had to credit, no credit something, it's fine. Even med school websites actually have addressed, like, what if you really felt the need to take a credit, no credit. Med school is always the worst case scenario for anything in terms of admission. So if med schools are saying, we're going to give you a little leeway on, this credit, no credit thing, everybody's aware. But as Elin said, it doesn't hurt to remind in the personal statement, remember, this was the pandemic, like, and there was lots going on, and I just really felt the need to not have that bad grade on my transcript.
Yeah. Some people may also have personal circumstances they're dealing with, right? So you may even want to include that in your personal statement too. Yeah.
Exactly. In the middle of my semester, my brother caught COVID. So we literally had to divide up the apartment, and he was on one side, the rest of us are on the other, and try not to, like, crap happens.
Yeah. And then the question about advanced stats and research, again, I don't think I can give you just one general answer. I do think it depends on the program, because even in so one I can recall, for example, social work, right? It's not a research program, it's considered a professional program, but one of the courses they want applicants to have is a research methodology course. Right. So again, it kind of speaks to the point you do need to research individual programs, because sometimes there may be prerequisites, or sometimes it may not be a prerequisite or be called a recommended course. And I would say in that situation, the recommended, it's almost like you should really have it. Okay. Because it will also prepare you for the master's. Okay. So if at this point we can just move on to the next common question, which is, what if my marks are not good enough? Okay, so again, we already talked about researching and understanding program requirements. So depending on where you are, you may want to consider upgrading. Okay, so you can certainly Google GPA calculator, and it will lead you to a tool where you can enter your current cumulative GPA, or your GPA for your third and fourth year. And then you can also enter in, a couple of additional courses and the grades you think you can earn in those courses, and see if that would bring up your GPA to meet the admission requirement or to become more competitive. Okay, so certainly it is possible for you to, even if you have graduated, it's possible for you to return and take more courses. The other, of course, is to consider additional option. Some programs competitive. That may also mean being more open-minded about different geographical location, right? So sometimes programs in the GTAs are more competitive, but if you're willing to consider going elsewhere in Ontario, elsewhere in Canada, you may have more options. And of course, a lot of times, the colleges also offer a lot of great options. The other question we sometimes get is, of course, about salary. Oh, sorry, there's a question about how do we upgrade our GPA.
How does that upgrading your GPA thing? So there's a status called non-degree student. Elin, do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So you can essentially return to the university and you will want to let the registrar know that you want to return as a non-degree student. So essentially you will still have access to Acorn. You would just continue to take more courses, right? Hopefully courses that are helpful in maybe relevant to your graduate program. So essentially the courses you take will continue to show up on your transcript. So with the GPA. And Jen is absolutely right. You can also take courses as a non-degree student at another university. So sometimes I would say if you are really eyeing a graduate program at York, you may also want to think about doing some undergrad courses at York to prepare yourself for that master's. It may be a little bit more relevant, especially if it's a specialization or area that may not be necessarily offered at UTSC, for example. So you may actually want to go to the university you wish to apply to because they may offer some undergraduate level courses that will prepare you better for that master program.
Yeah, and I just shared in the chat, I've also taken courses deliberately online just because it was more convenient for me while I was working. I'm assuming since all of you are attending a job search oriented conference that you're thinking about maybe working for a year before going back to school. And I've taken courses through Athabasca, which is in Alberta, but all their courses are by distance education. So they're convenient, they're asynchronous, and we all know now what synchronous and asynchronous means. So they're all asynchronous, which is great. So I don't have to worry about the Alberta time zone. It doesn't matter. And I could work through things at my own speeds, and I wasn't committed to a lecture at a particular time. It was handy.
Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, graduate school do consider your grades as a non-degree. Of course, that's a very broad statement. You may, if you're thinking about upgrading, again, I would say, first of all, you should have a couple of programs that you're interested in applying to. And I would say do your due diligence. Speak to those programs. You may want to express to them that, you know, you are considering upgrading and kind of ask them for some advice, some tips. Some school may say, you know, yes, we accept upgrading, but we really want you to take third and fourth year level courses, right? Or some school may say, we want to see you take a full course load, or we prefer you to do it on a full-time basis rather than a part-time basis. Okay, so you do kind of need to research. And in this case, I would recommend that you talk to the individual programs you might be interested in applying to, or at least reviewing their FAQ on their program pages, because a lot of them actually provide detailed answer to some of these questions about upgrading, about what kind of courses they want you to take, what level, right? Are there recommended courses they want to see on your transcript, okay? Just want to quickly cover some salary information. So this is a graph that I got from the Labor Market Information Council, LMIC. I included the link on the slide if you want to take a look, because what I selected, again, is just general bachelor compared to master degree, compared to professional degree, some salary information. But you may also want to go onto the website and select, because maybe what you're thinking about is a master's of arts in English, right? And do that comparison, because it does have more discipline specific salary information. So I encourage you to take a look at the website.
I'm sorry, what was that URL again, Elin? It's called
LMIC. So if you Google LMIC, it should lead you directly into that website. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of salary, again, I would just encourage you to think about your return on investment, right? So researching tuition costs, think about school expenses. If you're taking a loan, right? What's your expected interest from the loan? What's your expected salary? And have all that information so you can make a more informed decision. The other thing I often encourage students to think about is the opportunity cost, right? Because if you're spending 2 more years full-time studying, right, you're not necessarily making an income versus someone who may start working right away. So also, what's your opportunity cost? And also take that into account when you are making your decision about further education. I just also want to spend the last few minutes covering some other options. So if you're not master, certainly I think a very popular and great option would be postgraduate diploma or certificates at colleges. They're usually way shorter programs and they are targeted to give you knowledge and skills in a very specific area. And they're called postgraduate because they typically take into account your prior university education. Because one of the concerns I always hear about is, oh, I don't want my university education to go to waste. It is not going into waste because you already have your university education. That this is why you're eligible to do the shorter program. So you don't have to take, communication courses because your university education already proves that you have the ability to communicate, to read and write at a professional level. So some examples of postgrad diploma certificates could be addictions and mental health, interactive media management, marketing management, and a lot of them, again, also offer the co-op option, right? Of course, if you do co-op, the program does become longer. So some short postgrad diploma can be as short as 8 months, and some with a co-op, it may become a year because you spend 4 months working. Okay, so just some additional options for you to think about. And then some other option, which is now becoming very common and very popular because we're all online anyway, would be the massive online open courses. Okay, and again, the selection of courses out there is kind of unbelievable. You can pretty much learn anything you want to learn at a relatively low cost. Things like Coursera now have a subscription. Although I didn't find a monthly subscription, it was more of an annual subscription. You can pay $500 and take as many courses as you want. So Coursera also now is the Google Professional Certificate platform. So if you are interested in a career in UX design, project management, data analytics, you can actually complete a Google Career Certificate through Coursera. And it's now also widely accepted by a lot of employers. edX is another popular platform. Okay, so again, Khan Academy is another one, and some other examples on there. Another thing I want to point out is that us, a U of T alum, some of you already are, some of you may have to wait a little longer. There is also an alumni benefit through the School of Continuing Studies where you get a tuition credit to almost take a course for free. I believe the amount is $550. So I would recommend this to anyone who might be interested in exploring an area, but may not be 100% certain that they want to, devote 1 to 2 years or devote quite a chunk of tuition money. So for example, when I graduated, I actually took a course in human resources because I was also exploring human resources as a possible. So I actually took a human resources course through the School of Continuing Study to see if it's an area. As you can probably tell, I did not like it, so I didn't take more. And I actually went on to do some language courses and other fun things. Another really popular tool for learning is, of course, LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com. So it is part of LinkedIn now. Certainly, again, as part of the U of T alum, there's a new benefit for you to get LinkedIn Learning for 1 semester, I believe, starting from April to August. Okay, but if you are not graduating yet, a lot of the different public library also offers lynda.com subscription, so you can access it through your public library. Okay, so thank you, Jen, for clarifying. Continuing study is part of U of T, but keep in mind it is separate from your undergrad. So the courses you take at the School of Continuing Study does not go on your undergraduate transcript. You have a separate transcript, but in this case, you would not use it to apply to graduate program. Okay. All right, some other question I sometimes get is, do I have to do my master right away after my undergrad? So the short answer is no, there is no time restriction to when you do your master's. But I would say if you are thinking about master down the line, then it is important to keep in touch with your referees, okay?
Can I tell a quick story, true story?
Of course, yeah.
I don't know if any of you were at my networking session yesterday, but I talked about Dr. Brian Butler, who was one of my undergraduate professors, and he and I are still in touch 20 odd years later. And I share this story because I took a year off. So it was actually in my 4th year, I was doing my undergraduate thesis with him. I showed up crying at his office one day. I cried a lot in his office, I realized in hindsight. So I showed up crying at his office, and thankfully, he was always very kind and sat me down, and I explained that all my friends were going to grad school. This may sound familiar. All my friends are going to grad school, and I thought I wanted to as well, because I knew I wanted to be a counselor, a psychotherapist. But I really didn't like clinical psychology. My department was very heavily clinical psychology. And it was a bad fit for me. I'm not interested in looking at psychology that way. And I don't know what to do. And I kind of looked at social work and it wasn't a good fit either. So I was just like torn up. I had the grades. Thankfully, the grades weren't an issue. It was just, I really didn't know where to go. And thankfully, he, of course, being a professor, he knew a lot about different kinds of psychology. And it was him who introduced me to the field of counseling psychology, which had no presence at Queen's University, which is where I did my undergrad. And so I took a year off because I missed all the deadlines, of course, by the time I showed up in his office, crying. And so I kept in touch with him for a year. And of course, your professors are going to remember you, especially if you keep in touch and activate those neurons. Those of you in psychology and neuroscience, you know what I mean. Activate those memory pathways. You don't have to do it a lot, like just over the course of a year, send 2 emails reminding, here, I'm getting my personal statement ready. And at some point, you're probably going to want advice on a personal statement, right? So it's not that hard to ask a professor and say, I would like you to be a reference to me for grad school next year. And then keep in touch, after they've agreed, of course, keep in touch.
Yeah, totally. And I would say that I completed my undergrad at Waterloo, and my supervisor from my first co-op position, I kept in touch with her throughout the years, and she was a reference for every job I have ever applied to. So even when I applied for the career counselor job, okay, so it pays to keep in touch with people and to keep them in your network. The other question that we sometimes get is, do I have to specialize or major in chemistry or whatever discipline in order to do graduate school in chemistry or whatever discipline? Okay, so again, the short answer is no, but again, really driving home the point that you need to research the program because some of them do have prerequisites. Okay, so just to keep that in mind. And yes, I agree, hit up those
I think Elin was saying, yes, hit up the office hours, preferably not crying when you show up.
That could be a great way to make a lasting impression. Okay, so Jen already mentioned universitystudy.ca as a great resource to research Canadian graduate programs, but like Jen said, it only covers publicly funded programs, okay? So if the post-grad options that we talked about kind of pique your interest, then please take a look at ontariocolleges.ca. And of course,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I threw in the chat, but just to get it on the audio. I'm biased toward college programs because I have a college graduate certificate and I've worked in colleges prior to coming to U of T. And I'm a big fan of college postgraduate studies because they can get you to really cool places. And so just in the chat, I shared that before I came to U of T, I was working at Seneca College as the co-op officer for their marketing students. And so 7 years later, those grads, because I'm still in touch with them through LinkedIn, are working in really cool companies like Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, the company that runs Air Miles, they're called Loyalty One. One of my guys actually, it was just like, I really want the not-for-profit sector. And he has actually been working in the not-for-profit sector. Now he's pretty senior at the Sunnybrook Hospital Foundation, which is their fundraising division, because the government doesn't buy them a new MRI machine when they need one. They have to fundraise for their own MRI machine. So that's, those are like really high profile kinds of organizations that they're working for in really senior positions with college. So they did their bachelor degree and then did a 1-year college program, and the 1 year included co-op, which again is paid. So, some good stuff there.
Totally agree. Okay, and then just a reminder to use LinkedIn as a research tool. Okay, so some upcoming events that I want to let you guys know about, since you guys are all here and clearly interested in graduate school. On May 12th, we actually have an alumni panel from 4 different representatives who have gone to grad school or are in grad school right now in different disciplines. I think we have a representative doing school psychology. We have a representative done medicine, some in the health sciences. So again, if you're interested to hear different people's perspectives, interested in networking, please come out to the Thinking About Grad School alumni panel taking place on May 12th. We also are hosting a series of workshops. My colleague Byung, you may have met throughout the 3 days, is hosting a postgraduate study prep series. So it's 4 workshops, 1 per month starting in May. The first one's on May 20th, and he's going to include topics on like where to begin, admission tests, admission requirements, working on your CV, personal statement, funding, references, and interviews. Possibly anything you want to know in more detail from today. Beyond will cover it in these 4 workshops, okay? So sign up for both the panel and the workshop series is on CLNX. So please take a look at our event calendar. It is now, I think, 12:30. So the last point I want to make is that we are here to help. So please, email ANCC or give us a call. You can meet with me, you can meet with Jen, you can meet with Byung, any of us to talk about your further education options. Because I really believe whether it's graduate school or not, it's really important to me that we support you in making an informed decision.